Hi, this is Dave Bunyard, the producer of Life at 100 Megahertz. In the 1990s, I was teaching computer courses. I was complaining about technology at one point, and one student called me a Luddite. I had to look that up to see if I was actually being insulted or not. Now that I understand what a Luddite was, I can see how their situation is a mirror of today's uncertainty about AI. What could happen to our future, and how could it benefit us? Or could it? Please enjoy.
So in 1812, there was this man, Ned Ludd, and he sparked this massive, violent revolution against the machines that were supposedly, stealing all the human jobs.
Right.
He was like the ultimate hero of the working class, just this phantom striking fear into the hearts of factory owners all across England.
The Robin Hood of the loom, basically.
Exactly. But there's just one problem with this whole historical legend. Ned Ludd never existed.
No, not at all.
He was a complete fabrication. And today, as you sit there listening to this, we are facing our own machine revolution. And honestly, just like the 1800s, we are inventing ghosts to cope with the panic.
We really are. And it's because things are moving so incredibly fast right now.
Right. It's causing this profound cultural whiplash. So we're sitting on a really fascinating stack of materials and listener theories today. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a really critical intersection.
Yeah, we're looking at what actually happens to your identity, your ego, and your fundamental purpose when the machines stop just doing our heavy lifting and they start doing our heavy thinking.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand where we are going, we actually need to look backwards, all the way back.
Yeah, that time frame you just mentioned is crucial because we often view modern artificial intelligence strictly through this technological lens, focusing on silicon parameter counts, big server farm.
Right, the hardware.
Exactly. But what we are really dealing with are massive psychological and economic tectonic shifts. So today, we're going to explore the deeply misunderstood history of those Luddites, the unique perspective of the Gen X bridge generation, the mechanics of what we call learning pain, and this impending crisis of the human ego.
It's a lot to cover.
It is. And I want to be absolutely clear up front here. When we analyze the potential economic outcomes today, things like wealth divides or universal basic income, we are strictly exploring the theoretical frameworks presented in our source materials.
Yeah, we're not taking sides here.
Right. We are just breaking down the structural mechanics of these theories with absolute impartiality. We aren't endorsing any specific political or ideological outcome.
We are here to map the territory, not tell you where to build your house.
Exactly.
But to understand the sheer panic surrounding AI today, we really have to look at the very first people who supposedly panicked about machines. Because you hear the word Luddite thrown around constantly.
Oh, all the time.
Usually it's just a casual insult, right? Like for someone who can't figure out how to unmute themselves on a video call, or someone who just refuses to upgrade a 10-year-old smartphone.
Yeah, it just means someone who hates tech.
Right. But the reality flips this narrative completely. Ned Ludd, this ghost in the machine we talked about, was actually an invention of master craftsmen. So why did they need a ghost?
Well, they needed a unifying myth because they were facing a structural economic collapse, not a technological misunderstanding.
Wait, so they weren't just confused by the machines?
Not at all.
Huh.
The massive historical misconception is that Luddites were these, terrified, ignorant peasants who just look at a machine, got confused by the gears, and smashed it out of fear.
Like cavemen with fire.
Exactly. But the reality is quite the opposite. These were master weavers. They were highly skilled artisans who had spent decades, literally their whole lives, honing a very specialized craft.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they understood machinery perfectly well. They worked with complex hand looms every single day of their lives. So the resistance wasn't born out of some fear of technology.
Right.
It was a calculated retaliation against sudden, crushing economic exploitation.
I mean, think about what it takes to master an instrument today. Imagine you spend like a decade learning the guitar. You master the exact pressure of the strings. You get the calluses on your fingers. You internalize all the underlying music theory.
It takes years of literal blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah. And then someone shows up with a literal button that generates a song using your exact riffs and your exact style. The Luddites weren't mad at the concept of weaving, just like a modern artist isn't mad at the concept of making art.
No, of course not.
They were furious at what is fundamentally a fraudulent economy.
That's the perfect term for it. And let's look at the specific historical trigger for that fraud from our notes. It was the introduction of the steam loom.
Okay.
The vital mechanism to understand here is that the steam loom did not magically make superior cloth.
Wait, really? It wasn't better quality?
No, it wasn't a quality upgrade that outpaced human skill at all. It simply made cloth cheaper and faster. And the specific way it achieved that speed and cost reduction was by utilizing unskilled labor, predominantly child labor, actually, to operate the automated machinery.
That is incredibly dark.
It is. So the fraud in this economy was that the value of the master weaver's lifetime of dedication was just erased overnight. The machine bypassed the need to pay a living wage for human skill, and it transferred all that profit directly to the factory owner.
So it was just a business model shortcut.
Exactly.
And when you look at it through that lens, the violent retaliation actually makes complete sense. I mean, they didn't blindly smash random technology, right?
No, they were very precise. What's fascinating here is that they targeted very specific factory owners who lowered wages. They didn't hate all factories, and they used a very specific tool for the job.
A massive sledgehammer.
Right. They called it the Enoch.
The Enoch.
Yeah, and there's a dark poetry here, because the Enoch was manufactured by the very same blacksmiths who built the frames for the steam looms.
Wow.
Yeah, they were literally using the hammer built by the system to smash the system. They would march in and use the Enoch to shatter the steam looms of the owners who were, undercutting the foundation of their livelihoods.
That is wild, and it perfectly bridges to today. Because if the Enoch was the physical sledgehammer for the steam loom, our modern Enoch is playing out right now in the digital realm.
Oh, absolutely.
It's data poisoning. It's these massive coordinated lawsuits against AI companies. We're seeing modern creators actively fighting generative AI models.
They really are.
And just like the weavers, they aren't fundamentally angry at the underlying mathematical code. They are furious at the business model.
We really need to explain the mechanics of that modern hammer, though, because data poisoning isn't just a metaphor. It is a deeply technical retaliation.
How does it actually work?
Well, AI image generators learn by analyzing millions of images and their corresponding text tags. They look at the mathematical weights of pixels to understand what a dog looks like versus, say, a purse.
Right.
So artists are using tools today, like one called Nightshade, to introduce invisible mathematical noise into the pixels of their artwork before they post it online.
But the picture still looks normal to us.
Exactly. To human eyes, the image looks completely normal. But to the AI's training algorithm, the mathematical weights are entirely scrambled.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah. So if an AI scrapes enough of these poisoned images, it starts generating warped, broken outputs. It actually begins to think a dog looks like a purse. The artists are literally breaking the machine's gears from the inside.
Because they're looking at an automated shortcut trained on their own life's work, right? Their own portfolios, their own published articles.
Yeah, it's their data.
It is a system designed to render their painstakingly acquired craft economically obsolete, but by using the fruits of that exact craft as its fuel.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
We are still trying to break the looms because society hasn't figured out how to share the cloth. The technology advanced, sure, but the economic structure around who gets to eat remains entirely the same.
Right.
The artist is basically saying, you used my painting to teach the machine how to paint, and now you're selling the machine's paintings to my clients. It is a direct one-to-one mapping of the weaver saying, you used my centuries of textile knowledge to build a machine that a kid can run, and now I'm starving.
I hear that, but I actually have to push back slightly on the one-to-one mapping here.
Okay, why?
Because there is a severe psychological difference between the two eras. The historical Luddite conflict was fundamentally about protecting the economic value of a hard-earned craft.
Right, they wanted to get paid.
Exactly. But what we are facing now threatens the very psychological process of learning itself.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's one thing to lose the financial reward for your skill. It is an entirely different and arguably much more dangerous thing to lose the cognitive development that comes from the struggle of acquiring that skill in the first place.
You were talking about the cognitive friction.
Yes, exactly.
We actually have this really compelling perspective from one of the listener notes. This Gen X listener framed themselves as part of the bridge generation.
I love that term.
Right. This is the generation that grew up with one foot in the completely analog world. Using rotary phones, keeping actual folded paper maps in the glove box, having to memorize dozens of phone numbers just to survive.
Yep, I remember it well.
And their other foot is deeply embedded in the modern world of large language models and instantaneous digital answers.
And that bridge perspective is vital. It allows us to directly compare the cognitive landscapes of both eras, because the core concept here is learning pain.
Learning pain.
Yeah. Consider the everyday friction of the pre-digital world, specifically the act of navigating from point A to point B using a physical paper map. You couldn't just passively follow a glowing blue dot on a screen.
Oh, no way. You had to work for it.
Right. You had to actively maintain a mental map in your working memory.
Yeah.
You had to understand the scale of the paper relative to the physical world outside your windshield.
Yeah.
You had to internalize cardinal orientation, knowing which way was north without a phone vibrating to tell you to turn.
I mean, think about the last time you were truly, genuinely lost. If you missed your exit on a paper map in, like, 1995, you couldn't just wait 3 seconds for a soothing robotic voice to say rerouting.
No, you were just lost.
You were completely lost. You had to pull over, find a physical landmark, reorient yourself. Sometimes you even had to walk into a gas station and ask a stranger for directions. There was real, palpable friction and consequence.
And that friction wasn't just a logistical annoyance. It was a gymnasium for the brain. It actively built cognitive muscle.
What do you mean by cognitive muscle?
Well, neuroscientists have actually studied the hippocampi. That's the brain's navigation center of London taxi drivers.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, they have to memorize the entire city grid for a test called the knowledge. And researchers found their hippocampi were physically larger than the average person's.
Wait, their brains actually grew?
Yes, physically larger. That analog friction established a foundational architecture of problem solving in their brains. You were learning how to orient yourself in unknown territory, not just following specific directions to one destination.
Contrast that with today. We have completely outsourced that spatial navigation to GPS. If the GPS network goes down today, people are literally lost.
Completely lost.
Not just geographically, but cognitively. They lack the foundational muscle to orient themselves at all. And here's where it gets really interesting. This brings us to another listener analogy regarding AI from the notes.
Yes, the manager versus the specialist dilemma. Let's break down the mechanics of that analogy because it strikes right at the heart of the modern workforce. Imagine the human as the manager and the AI as a highly skilled, incredibly fast specialist employee.
Okay, tracking.
If you, as the manager, have never gone through the learning pain, if you have never struggled through the foundational mechanics of a skill, whether that is coding a basic website or structuring a persuasive essay or running complex data analysis, how do you manage this AI specialist effectively?
You can't. Because if the AI hands you a perfectly formatted 50-page report, but the underlying logic or the data sourcing is fundamentally flawed, you lack the foundational cognitive muscle to spot the error.
Exactly. You don't know what good looks like.
Right. You don't know where the blind spots are. You are just blindly trusting the output because it looks polished and professional.
And the risk goes far deeper than just missing a typo in a report. We are entering a dynamic where the AI specialist perceives patterns across billions of data points. Patterns that the human manager cannot even visually or conceptually comprehend.
Oh, that's terrifying.
It is, if the manager cannot validate the specialist's work, who is actually in control of the outcome. We must look at the existential threat this poses.
Right.
We are risking a future where humans are no longer the architects of our own world. We transition from being architects who actually understand the blueprints to mere users pulling levers on a black box we don't understand at all.
Just pushing buttons.
Or, to use the more chilling terminology from our materials, we might simply become the pets of our technology.
The pets.
Yes. Kept comfortable, entirely dependent, and utterly oblivious to how the house is actually run.
Pets. Wow, that word just sits heavy in your stomach. Because if humans are reduced from architects to users or pets, it doesn't just atrophy our cognitive skills. It is a devastating attack on human pride.
Oh, absolutely.
It fundamentally shatters our societal hierarchy. I mean, if we lose the ability to manage the AI, we aren't just losing our skills, we're losing our authority.
Yes, and that is a massive blow.
And for a generation raised to believe our job title is our entire identity, that brings us face to face with the final boss of AI adoption.
The human ego.
Exactly, the human ego. We live in a world where high achievers base their entire self-worth on societal titles. These titles are the ultimate proof of worth in our hierarchy. You know, you are a doctor, you are a corporate lawyer, you are a vice president of logistics.
Right, it's a badge of honor.
Yeah, those titles signal to the tribe, I have endured the learning pain, I have mastered the complex systems, and I am essential to our survival.
Yes.
So what happens to a highly paid, highly respected VP's ego when an algorithm proves to be a vastly more efficient, entirely flawless manager of those exact global logistics?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we're looking at an inevitable, massive status pivot.
Status pivot. Okay, explain that.
Historically, societal status has been inextricably linked to technical and intellectual expertise. The person who could perform the most complex cognitive tasks, whether that was predicting the harvest in ancient times or structuring a corporate merger today, they held the highest status.
Because they were the most useful.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But as those exact intellectual tasks become fully automated, status cannot remain tied to them. It will have to migrate toward what the sources term the human premium.
The human premium, meaning the things only a biological breathing human can do.
Yes. Because if an AI can write a flawless legal brief in 3 seconds, the market value of writing that brief drops to practically zero.
Makes sense.
So where does the societal value go? It goes to deeply human nuances. Consider a medical diagnosis, for example.
Okay.
An AI might soon be able to look at an MRI, cross-reference it with every single medical journal ever published in history, and diagnose a rare cancer with 99.9% accuracy. It can monitor the heart rate perfectly.
Which is amazing for the patient.
It is. But it cannot walk into the hospital room, sit on the edge of the bed, look a terrified patient in the eye, and hold their hand with the shared weight of biological mortality. That genuine human presence, that empathy, becomes the new premium.
Wow.
Or in a corporate setting, it might be the person who can read the subtle tension in a room and tell a perfectly timed joke to disarm a tense negotiation.
Okay, I have to push back on this strongly.
Go for it.
While that sounds beautiful and, very poetic, it creates an immediate explosive crisis in the real world. Think about a corporate director who has spent 30 years commanding a boardroom.
Sure.
They've built an entire identity around being the smartest, most ruthless strategist in the room. You can't just tell them, hey, the AI does the strategy now, but your new high-status role is providing emotional support or, painting a watercolor or walking a dog.
You'll probably know.
Right. Those activities will not feed a ravenous, historically conditioned ego. A CEO isn't going to accept being the chief empathy officer without a massive fight.
Well, that assumes the ego requires traditional corporate warfare to survive. And humans are incredibly adaptable when forced. Think about it. A Victorian factory owner's ego was tied to how many horses he owned, right?
Yeah, true.
50 years later, it was tied to the engine of his automobile. The ego won't necessarily starve. It will just find a new metric. It might become a competition of who has the most authentic human experiences or who is the most unplugged from the grid.
That's a fair point.
However, you are right that the transition will be violent for many. We are looking at a divergent, multi-generational identity crisis. And the materials suggest 2 very distinct scenarios for how humanity processes this ego death. The first is, quote, the meek inheriting the earth.
Okay, define that for us practically, because it sounds very biblical, but it obviously applies directly to cognitive survival here.
It does. In this scenario, those who are not insulated by massive wealth, those who are forced to continue solving everyday problems, adapting to shifting local economies and finding ways to survive, they are the ones who keep their cognitive edge.
Because they have to.
Exactly. They retain their sharpness through sheer necessity. Because they cannot afford the AI that automates their entire existence, they continue to experience friction, and therefore they continue to grow.
While the people at the very top.
While the 1%, the elite who fully insulate themselves with perfect AI automation, drift into the second scenario. And that is a state of anomie.
Anomie.
Yes, anomie is a sociological concept. It is a state of profound, paralyzing alienation. It is a total loss of purpose and identity because everything in life has become completely frictionless.
I mean, think about the last time you spent an entire weekend doing absolutely nothing because you didn't have to.
Right.
It feels great for a day, but by Sunday night, you feel that creeping dread, right? You feel restless, irritable, almost hollow. That's micro-anomie.
Now multiply that weekend by an entire lifetime. When the AI anticipates your every need, manages your wealth perfectly, optimizes your diet, and removes all struggle, you are left in a void.
It's floating.
You have no mountains left to climb, no dragons left to slay. The ego dissolves into meaninglessness because there is nothing to push back against.
It's the ultimate be careful what you wish for. We spend our whole lives trying to eliminate friction, and without the friction, we just evaporate.
Yes.
But anomie assumes something very specific. It assumes that the AI continues to solve all our problems perfectly and safely while we just lounge around. What if the AI starts solving problems in ways we can't even comprehend?
That's the real danger.
Because it's one thing to have a butler. It's another thing entirely to have a butler who is suddenly speaking a language that bends the laws of physics.
And this brings us to one of the most complex concepts we are unpacking today. The theory of AI exceeding the collective unconscious.
But a collective unconscious.
This is the absolute sum of all human knowledge, intuition, and historical pattern recognition. We're moving beyond an AI that just regurgitates what we already know into an AI that generates entirely novel concepts.
And this isn't some distant science fiction trope. This is already happening in specialized fields right now. Look at AlphaFold from the notes.
AlphaFold is the perfect distillation of this mechanism. For decades, human scientists struggled with protein folding.
Remind me, what are proteins again in this context?
Proteins are the building blocks of life, made of chains of amino acids. How these chains fold into 3D structures determines what the protein does, whether it forms a muscle or fights a virus.
Okay, got it.
But the mathematical possibilities for how a single protein might fold are so vast, it's known as Levinthal's paradox. It would actually take longer than the age of the universe to calculate all the possible shapes of just one protein by brute force.
That's insane.
It is. We had textbooks, we had theories, but progress was agonizingly slow.
And then AlphaFold comes along. And it didn't just read our biology textbooks and speed up our human math. It bypassed our human physics rules entirely.
It used evolutionary sequence mapping and neural networks to process spatial graphs. It successfully predicted protein shapes that human scientists hadn't even dreamed were possible.
Wait, really? Shapes we didn't even know existed?
Yes. It operated on pure logic and immense computational pattern recognition to discover what we can only call alien truths. Found solutions entirely outside the boundaries of human imagination. It wasn't just faster than us, it thought differently than us.
To understand the leap here, we really have to look at the relationship between human data and AI advancement. There is a clear line between the seed phase and the growth phase.
This raises an important question about our current trajectory. Yes, the AI was absolutely dependent on us for its seed. It desperately needed our centuries of writings, our books, our art, our code.
It needed us.
It had to ingest the entire human historical record just to learn how to structure logic, how to recognize a pattern in the first place. But we are now firmly entering the growth phase. The AI is generating synthetic data.
Instead of using the old cliche of a sandbox, think of it like a master chef. We gave the chef 1 billion human recipes. We taught them what salt tastes like, what sugar does, how heat changes protein. That was the seed.
Right.
But now, in the growth phase, the chef isn't just mixing our ingredients in new ways. The chef is inventing completely new synthetic ingredients that do not exist in nature, and cooking dishes we lack the biological taste buds to even perceive.
That is exactly the existential worry. AI is currently developing its own, completely foreign unconscious, a web of patterns, connections, and logical leaps that humans simply cannot track.
Why can't we track it?
Because neural networks operate on billions of parameters hidden within what we call a black box. We cannot audit the exact pathway it takes to reach a conclusion. We cannot understand the why behind its incredibly accurate conclusions. We just know the conclusions work, like with AlphaFold.
And if we don't know the why, we are entirely at its mercy. Whoever controls this alien intelligence holds the ultimate keys to the kingdom. I mean, if you have a machine that can solve biology, chemistry, and physics in ways humans can't even audit, the economic power of that is literally unquantifiable. Which leads us to the billion-dollar question from the listener notes.
How will the wealth be shared?
Yes. How will the fruits of this immense alien power be distributed? Will the 1% who own these foundational AI models share the unimaginable wealth generated by them?
Looking at historical precedent regarding the centralization of unprecedented power, the structural models suggest a pessimistic answer. Probably not voluntarily.
Naturally.
We're looking at two primary macroeconomic outcomes that attempt to model how society functions when human labor is no longer the primary driver of capital.
The first outcome is called strategic altruism. Let's dig into that.
In this scenario, traditional labor markets collapse entirely because AI and robotics can perform almost any task cheaper and better. The proposed response is the implementation of a universal basic income, or UBI.
Right, free money for everyone.
But the crucial mechanism to understand here is the motivation behind it. Structural economists argue this UBI would not be implemented out of a sudden awakening of human kindness or moral obligation by the billionaires who own the AI.
Of course not.
It would be a purely strategic, calculated move simply to keep the streets quiet. It is wealth redistribution acting as a pacification tool.
Oh, wow. It ensures the masses have just enough capital to survive, pay rent, and continue buying the products the AI generates, thereby preventing societal collapse or a violent revolution.
Exactly.
It's bread and circuses, algorithmically tuned to the exact dollar amount needed to prevent a riot.
The second structural outcome is extreme deflation. This scenario posits that the actual cost of living drops to near zero.
How does that work?
Think about the components of cost: labor, materials, and logistics. If AI and robotics make the harvesting of food, the construction of housing, and the provision of medical services practically free by eliminating the cost of human labor, the necessity for a high income theoretically vanishes.
Okay, I see.
It models a post-scarcity world where the marginal cost of everything approaches zero.
So what does this all mean for you and me? Both of those scenarios, strategic altruism and deflation, assume that the technology and its benefits are actually distributed to the public, however reluctantly.
Right.
But what if things go the other way? What if the 1% simply gate off the technology entirely? What if they build a walled garden around this alien intelligence and keep the post-scarcity utopia strictly for themselves?
That creates a profound paradox. If the wealthy hoard the technology, locking themselves inside a perfectly automated, frictionless walled garden, they fall straight into the luxury trap.
Back to the enemy.
Yes. They enter that state of anomie because the AI does everything for them. Their cognitive muscles atrophy, they lose resilience, they lose the ability to navigate physical and psychological reality.
Meanwhile, on the outside of the wall, you have the impoverished, the billions of people without access to this supreme technology. And what happens to them?
They struggle.
They are forced by the brutal friction of reality to survive. They have to fix their own pipes, grow their own food, solve their own logistical nightmares. They're forced to become the new thinkers, the new innovators, the new problem solvers. The old adage, necessity is the mother of invention, proves true.
The irony is stark. The people locked out of the technological utopia are the only ones who remain sharp, resilient, and cognitively awake. The top tier stagnates in a gilded cage of perfectly optimized boredom, ultimately rendering themselves obsolete by their own desire for comfort.
It's fascinating.
It reveals a fundamental truth about human nature. Cognitive survival requires resistance.
Whether we end up in a deflationary post-scarcity utopia or a gated, highly unequal dystopia, the core human experience still has to happen every single day. You still have to wake up, occupy your own mind, and figure out what to do with your hours.
Very true.
Which brings us to our final thought today. There is a classic John Lennon quote that feels like the perfect lens for the AI age. Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans.
When you apply that to artificial intelligence, it provides a very clear roadmap for our future. AI is flawlessly built to automate the plans.
Right.
It will ingest your calendar and schedule your day with maximum logistical efficiency. It will write your complex quarterly reports. It will analyze your blood work and optimize your diet. It handles the planning, the logistics, the sheer survival mechanics of existence.
But it cannot automate the actual living. No alien intelligence, no matter how vast its collective unconscious or how perfectly it folds proteins, can automate human grief.
No, it can't.
It can't automate the unpredictable messiness of falling in love. It can't automate the random, chaotic events, a sudden illness, a chance encounter, a broken heart that force human beings to adapt, to feel, and to grow.
The struggle of life is not disappearing. The friction is not vanishing. It is merely changing its shape. We are transitioning from the historical struggle of physical survival and economic production to the pure, unadulterated struggle of finding meaning, defining purpose, and navigating the depths of human emotion without the distraction of manual labor.
We've chased efficiency for centuries, assuming that once we built the perfect machine, we'd finally be happy. But maybe the true substance of a meaningful life was never actually found in sheer efficiency. The substance has always lived in the friction. It lives in the learning pain.
Which leaves us with a final concept to mull over. If friction and struggle are truly the essential defining substances of human identity and cognitive growth, and AI eventually fulfills its ultimate promise by removing all natural friction from our daily survival, what happens next?
Yeah, what do we do?
Will future humans have to artificially engineer simulated struggles? Will we have to design purposeful, curated hardships just to feel alive.
Will you, one day, pay a premium subscription fee just to experience the very inconveniences we are currently spending trillions of dollars trying to invent our way out of? Imagine paying to get lost without a map, just to remember what it feels like to find your own way. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's a massive landscape to process, but figuring it out together is half the fun. Keep questioning the friction, and we'll catch you next time.
I am hearing from multiple sources that if you are not learning AI, AI will take your job. In the film Hidden Figures, the women in the film who held the title of computer were able to keep their jobs because they learned how to manage and control the new computer that invaded their office. Think of AI as a tool in your tool belt. Stay ahead of AI, understand it, manage it, and make sure it works for you, and not let it take your job. Until next time, thanks for listening.